Watch till the end. If you want to sleep, you won't know you have slept off. Tonight's story takes us far away, to a cold land of forests, lakes, and quiet snow. A land where winter stretches long, and the wind hums through tall pine trees. This is Finland, a northern country where life moves slowly, and sleep, even in the coldest months, finds its own special rhythm. Somewhere in the quiet corners of this country, there are families, not so long ago, who napped not in soft beds or beside fireplaces, but inside old wooden barns, curled close to something large, warm, and alive. They nap with cows. Yes, cows. It may sound strange. In a world of memory foam, pillows, and climate control, it's hard to imagine sleeping beside a large animal. But here, in the snowy countryside of Finland, it was once a gentle, almost sacred tradition. And for some, in rural villages far from towns, it still is, not for everyone. But for some older farmers, and even curious travelers looking for comfort in ancient ways. The barn is not just for the animals. It is a place of warmth, a place of rest, a place where sleep comes easier. When shared, the story begins in the quiet time of year, when the sun rises late and sets early. Outside, snow is falling, soft and endless. Each flake lands without a sound, covering the fields in thick white silence. The trees stand still, their branches heavy with frost, and in the far north of Finland, above the Arctic Circle, the sky glows dim and blue. Even at midday, inside an old red barn, painted with fading color and built from thick pine logs, there is light, not electric, but the golden flicker of an oil lamp hanging near the low wooden rafters, and heat, not from radiators or heaters, but from the slow breath of cows, from their great bodies, warm and calm, tucked close together on beds of straw. The cows lie down, their large brown eyes blind. Something ancient stirs, a deep memory of living alongside animals, not apart from them. In Finland, this practice even has a name. It's part of a larger tradition called leman kanssa nukkuminen, sleeping with the cow. It's not common today, but it's remembered, passed down in stories and sometimes even revived, especially in old villages or farm stays where tourists can come and try it for themselves. In one such place, far in the east near the Russian border, an old couple keeps their grandparents' barn just as it was. No electricity, no insulation, only the cows and the bed in the corner. When guests arrive in winter, the couple offers them something special. Not a hotel room, but a nap in the barn. They're given warm socks, thick mittens, and a mug of hot berry juice. Then they're led into the barn, where the cows are already chewing slowly in their stalls. The air is cold at first, but it warms quickly. The hay smells sweet, the cows breathe deeply, and soon, without meaning to, the guests begin to yawn. Their eyes close. The heat from the cows wraps around them like a soft blanket, and they sleep. No phone, no screens. Only the sounds of animals and the slow tick of time. The barn is made of thick pine, its beams blackened from age. On the walls hang bundles of dried herbs, thyme, juniper, mint, once used to scent the air or keep away flies. Now, in the deep freeze of winter, the air is too still for flies. The herbs are just for smell. The gentle scent mixes with the hay and wood smoke, and creates a space outside of time. Outside, a soft wind pushes the snow into gentle drifts. Inside, it is warm. The nap might last 20 minutes, or 2 hours. Time means nothing here. And when the sleeper wakes, their face is pink from the warmth. Their clothes smell faintly of hay. Their mind is quiet. This is not just rest, it's peace. a kind of return to something. Ing older than houses, older than beds, a way of sleeping that remembers. We are animals too. There are stories from old Finnish folk tales where people believed cows had spirits, that they watched over the barn, that they could sense when something was wrong. Perhaps this is why people felt safe sleeping near them. Some say that in the barn, surrounded by cows, they dream differently, more vivid, more calm. They wake feeling not just rested, but changed. There is even research today into why animals help people sleep. Therapists now use dogs or cats to help children fall asleep after trauma. Weighted blankets, soft breathing toys, all mimic something very old. The comfort of another breathing body close by and in the Finnish barn. You don't need a toy. You have a cow. As the oil lamp flickers low, shadows move along the rafters. A soft moo rumbles in the dark. The cows shift, stretch, settle again, but not everything in the barn is old and still. Sometimes, something new arrives. One night, not long ago, during one of the coldest winters in memory, a strange sound echoed across the snowy fields. A sound no one expected. Not in this quiet place, a low rumble, a vibration in the ground, almost like thunder. But the sky was clear. Inside the barn, the cows stopped chewing. The lamp flickered again. The walls gave a soft creak, and then the sound came again, closer now. The sleepers stirred beneath their blanket, blinking slowly, unsure if they were dreaming. Then came a third sound, louder, heavier, and suddenly the barn shuddered. Just once, like a heartbeat. The cows rose to their feet, the wind outside had stopped. The silence was complete, and just as the breath of the animals grew still and the glow of the lamp dimmed, the heavy wooden door of the barn began to creak open somewhere in the far, far north, where the snow stretches out like a great white blanket, where pine trees whisper softly under the weight of frost. The world is quiet again, but in the barn, the air is different now. A hush has fallen. Not the peaceful hush of sleep, but something more alert. Even the cows have gone still, their heads raised, their wide eyes watching. The heavy wooden door, old and weathered from many winters, stands half open. A thin curl of wind snakes through the crack, carrying flakes of snow that spin gently in the lamplight. Nothing moves outside, nothing steps through, only the cold enters, slowly, like a curious breath. Inside the barn, the cows snort softly. One swishes its tail, another takes a slow, steady step back toward the wall. Their hooves press gently into the straw, making a soft, rustling sound. The person beneath the blankets, still half asleep, still warm from the shared heat of animals, blinks. They are not afraid, just curious, just very still. Then, from the doorway, a sound, not a word, not a voice, but a low, soft hum, almost like singing, but slower, older. It doesn't rise or fall, it just hums, constant, gentle, strange. And then, just beyond the frame of the doorway, something moves. Not a person, not an animal, just a shape, covered in snow, wrapped in heavy wool. A figure steps slowly into the barn, quiet, careful, like they do not wish to disturb anything. The figure is tall, their shoulders dusted white. They carry no bag, no tools, just a small lantern in one hand, though it is not lit. They pause just inside the door, as if listening. The cows shift again, their tails flicking once, but they do not cry out. They do not panic, they watch. And the figure, whoever they are, nods once. A slow, deep nod, as if to the animals, as if in respect. Then they close the door, gently, and the barn grows warm again. The sleeper watches from beneath the blankets, their breath quiet, still not afraid, just watching. The figure walks past the stalls, past the cows. Their boots crunch gently over the straw. They stop in the center of the bay, run beside the old oil lamp, and for a moment they simply stand there, breathing. The cows begin to settle once more. One lies down, another begins to chew slowly. The figure takes off their snow-covered coat, revealing another layer beneath. Thick gray wool, patched and worn. They hang the coat on a wooden peg near the ladder, then move toward the empty end of the wooden platform. Not the part where the sleeper rests, but the far corner. And there they sit, not speaking, not disturbing, just sitting. And slowly, very slowly, the barn becomes calm again. The lamp flickers, the air grows warm once more, and the figure, this silent visitor, leans against the wall and closes their eyes. The cows breathe deeply, the straw crackles, the barn sighs, and the sleeper, still wrapped in wool, still tucked near the warm flanks of a resting cow, feels their eyes begin to close again. This is Finland. Things are not rushed here. Nothing needs to be explained. People come and go, sometimes without words, sometimes only with silence. And in that silence there is peace. Perhaps the figure was a traveler, lost in the snow, needing shelter, or perhaps they were a neighbor, one who remembers the old ways, who knows the value of a warm barn on a cold night. In some villages there are unspoken rules. A barn with an open door means safety, not just for animals, but for people too. For wanderers, for those between places, to lie beside a cow is not strange here. It is an old kindness. In fact, there are even older stories, passed down in whisper and song, about a time when barns were seen as sacred, not holy like churches, but deeply respected. They were places of birth, of life, of warmth in the coldest season, in the deepest parts of Karelia, an eastern region of Finland known for its songs and stories. People believed in house spirits, small, unseen beings who watched over the oike, ome, and also the barn. These spirits were quiet. They did not like noise, but they protected the animals, protected those who slept near them sometimes. People left small gifts, a bit of bread, a drop of milk, at the barn door, as a thank you, as a wish for safety and rest. Tonight, the figure makes no offering, but still, the barn seems to accept them. And soon, their breathing joins the slow rhythm of the cows. Time drifts, the oil lamp burns lower. Outside, the wind picks up again. Snow taps softly against the walls, but inside, the world is still. Even the figure begins to drift into sleep. Their back against the old pine wall, their hands folded in their lap. No words, no questions, only warmth, only breathing, and the deep, steady heartbeat of the earth. In the quiet of the barn, the sleeper dreams of wide-open fields, of low golden sun on snow-covered branches, of the soft, hot breath of cows rising into the cold morning air. They dream of wool, of hay, of silence, of a time when humans did not sleep alone. And then the barn creaks again, but this time not from the wind, from above, very faint, a soft tapping sound. Tap, tap, pause, tap. The sleeper stirs, the cows remain calm, but the figure, the silent one in the gray wool, lifts their head. They listen. Another tap from the loft above the stalls, where hay is stored in large bales, where no one is supposed to be. The figure stands slowly. No hurry, no fear. They reach for the oil lamp, now dim and sputtering, and hold it up toward the ceiling. The light dances across the wooden rafters, casting long shadows into the corners. Another tap, and then the faintest crunch, like straw being stepped on. Light footsteps, the cows rise again. Not afraid, but curious, the visitor moves toward the wooden ladder that leads to the loft. They do not speak, they do not gesture. They climb one step, then another. The oil lamp glows dimly below. The barn is still. The sleeper watches, eyes barely open, half in dream, and just as the figure's head reaches to, he top-rung. Just as they peer over the edge into the darkness of the hay, a sudden gust of wind slams against the outside wall. The door, tightly closed moments ago, bursts open, snow pours in. The lamp blows out. And in the dark, from the loft, something moves. The barn was dark now. The oil lamp had gone out. Its soft orange glow, once dancing across wooden beams and resting cows, was gone, leaving only the quiet shapes of animals and snow swirling in the open doorway. The wind outside had grown stronger, blowing in small white flakes that floated gently across the straw-covered floor. But inside the barn, everything stayed calm. The cows didn't panic. They stood still for a moment, then slowly lay back down, trusting the walls to hold steady, trusting the night to pass like so many others before. The visitor in the gray wool had disappeared into the loft above. No words had been spoken, no questions asked. Just slow movement, a climbing body, a soft hush of footsteps on wood. And now, only silence remained, not the kind that feels empty, but the kind that feels full, full of breath, of warmth, of presence. The sleeper, still wrapped in thick blankets near the largest cow, kept their eyes half closed. There was no fear, only curiosity, a gentle wondering, the kind of wondering that doesn't rush, that doesn't need answers right away. Above, the loft stretched across half the barn. It was filled with old bales of hay, some stacked neatly, others fallen over with age. The scent was sweet and dusty, a warm smell like dried summer. When the wind outside paused for a breath, it left behind a silence so soft you could almost hear the snow settle on the rooftop. In that stillness, something shifted above. Not loud, just the slow press of weight on hay. A light step, then another. Something, or someone, was walking across the loft. The figure in gray wool moved slowly, and not lighting the lamp again, instead they let their hands guide them, touching the thick wood beams, stepping carefully around loose straw. They paused near the edge, close enough that their outline could just be seen from below, a darker shape in the even darker space. Another sound came from farther in the loft. Not walking now, but something softer. A small, steady movement, like breathing or whispering, or maybe just wind brushing against hay. The cows stirred again, but only slightly. One raised its head, then lowered it back down with a long, slow exhale. Their breath, heavy and warm, hung in the air like a cloud before fading. The person below, still resting near the cow's side, listened. Their heart was quiet, their eyes closed again. The body relaxed, even though the mind still wandered gently. In Finnish winters, the dark comes early, and deep in the countryside, the dark isn't broken by streetlights or distant cars. It's a pure dark, shaped only by moonlight or the faint green shimmer of northern lights. Tonight, the moon was hidden. The snow, however, gave off its own quiet glow, casting the barn's doorway in a pale, ghostly silver. That silver light reached just a few steps inside, brushing over the straw, catching the tip of the ladder that led to the loft, then fading into shadow. The sleeper didn't remember falling asleep again, but at some point, the weight of warmth and the sound of breath wrapped around them like a second blanket, the softness of cowhide near their back, the scent of hay in their nose, the deep stillness of the barn. It pulled them inward, into that place where thoughts become fog and time loses shape. They dreamed of pine forests covered in snow, of quiet lakes frozen under the stars, of heavy blankets and wool socks and hot juice shared near a crackling fire. And in the loft, the visitor found what had made the sound. It was not a person. It was not an animal either. It was something small, something left behind. A bundle, wrapped tightly in wool and placed carefully in the hay, as if by Jend. Tall hands. The figure knelt beside it. A breath escaped them, soft and slow. They reached out and touched the bundle with care, like someone waking a child from a nap. The barn below remained quiet, but a soft, clicking sound echoed from above. Maybe a wooden clasp, or a buckle being unfastened. Then, barely heard, the crinkle of fabric, a rustle of hay, and a whisper, not words, just a soft, human sound, like surprise or relief. Below, the cows began to breathe more deeply, settling again. One let out a low, slow moo, a kind of sigh in the dark. The sleeper stirred gently, half waking, half dreaming, feeling the warmth of the barn wrap around them again. The visitor did not come down. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. In the quiet rhythm of the barn, time became soft and loose. The wind outside dropped again. The snow slowed. And in that deep stillness, a feeling began to grow. A sense that something old was being remembered. Something that had been forgotten for a long time. A rhythm, a ritual, the shared sleep of humans and animals, the shared warmth of strangers, the barn as shelter, the loft as mystery. Eventually, the clouds shifted. A line of moonlight fell through the high window near the roof, landing in a narrow stripe across the floor. Dust floated through it, glittering slowly. The moonlight climbed inch by inch up the far wall of the barn. Then, without warning, a sharp sound cracked across the roof. Wood splintering, not loud, but not soft either. The cows all lifted their heads at once. The sleeper sat up. Above, in the loft, the figure stood. A second crack came, sharper this time, more urgent. It was the sound of snow. Moving. Then another noise, a deep, slow groan. Not from inside the barn, but from the roof itself. The snow was heavy tonight. Heavier than usual. Too heavy. In old Finnish barns, the roofs are steep for a reason, to let snow glide off. But sometimes, if the snow gets too wet, too packed, too still, it stays. And when that happens, weight can build. One of the cows let out a low, nervous sound. The figure in the loft reached quickly for the bundle and lifted it with both hands. Another crack, and then a long creak, like ice splitting far across a lake. The sleeper stood now, blinking, heart suddenly faster. Then it happened. A section of the roof, up near the top beams, gave way. It did not fall completely, but the snow above it slid, fast, sudden, loud, and crashed onto the outer slope of the roof. The sound was like thunder. The whole barn shook. Hay from the loft spilled over the edge in a golden rain. The cows stood up quickly, hooves rustling against the floor. The wind howled once, sweeping snow through the doorway again. And up in the loft, the figure was gone. But something else was there, something glowing. Not fire, not a lamp, but a small, steady light. Coming from inside the bundle, the barn was quiet again, though the sound of the sliding snow still lingered in the bones of the building. The air had shifted. It wasn't colder, but it felt thinner, like the space had changed, grown more awake somehow. The cows stood still for a moment longer, their large eyes turning toward the loft where the shape of the visitor had last been seen. Then, slowly, one by one, they settled back down. They knew the barn. They trusted it. Whatever had moved, the snow had passed, the walls had held, the roof had not caved, but the light above remained. It wasn't bright, it wasn't sharp, it was soft, like the first glow of morning through thick curtains. It came from the loft, hidden partly by the wooden edge, partly by hay still spilling gently over the edge like golden ribbons. The sleeper stood below, breathing slowly, wrapped still in their blanket, unsure whether they were truly awake. The dream-like calm of the barn hadn't broken, not fully. Even now, with something strange glowing above, the air was still gentle. They took a step forward. Then another. The COs didn't react. One of them even closed its eyes again, as if choosing rest over questions. The ladder to the loft was old, worn smooth by hands and boots over many winters. It creaked slightly as the sleeper placed a foot on the bottom rung, then another. The barn stretched tall above them, the rafters dark with age, the air full of the smell of old wood, dry straw, and warmth. As they climbed, the glowing light grew a little brighter. Not glaring, not artificial, it pulsed gently, like something breathing, alive, but calm. The top of the loft came into view. Bales of hay were scattered, some neat, some collapsed. Dust floated in the light, sparkling in slow motion. The bundle, the one the figure had cradled earlier, was resting in the center, just where the hay had flattened. It glowed from within, a soft amber color, like warm honey or sunlight through thick clouds. No one else was up there now. The figure in gray was gone. Only the bundle remained. The sleeper reached the final rung and stepped quietly onto the loft floor. It felt soft beneath their feet, the hay thick and giving. The light did not flicker or move. It simply glowed. There was no sound, no hum, no vibration. Just that steady amber color glowing through the folds of the woolen wrapping. They knelt beside it. The bundle was small, no larger than a loaf of bread, wrapped tightly in coarse wool cloth, tied with a thin leather strap, dusted lightly with hay and the melting edges of snow. The glow came not from the fabric itself, but from something within. Not hot, not sharp, just present, warm. They reached out slowly. Fingers touched the edge of the cloth. It was dry, coarse, like something woven long ago and softened by years of handling. Their fingers found the leather strap, then hesitated. The barn below was silent. Even the wind had gone still again. They undid the strap, the cloth loosened, and beneath it was a small wooden box, no larger than a hand, made of something dark, birch, perhaps, or pine stained by smoke. It had no hinges, no carvings, only a single seam down the middle where the top met the base. And from inside, the glow, the sleeper sat back, holding the box in their hands. It was light, much lighter than expected, as if it were hollow. They lifted the lid, and what they saw inside wasn't light. Not exactly. It was snow, but not cold, snow that glowed, tiny flakes like ash or feathers floating gently inside the box, not melting, not still. The flakes moved slowly in a soft current, like they were falling through water. The amber light came from them, from the way they drifted and shimmered, never touching the bottom of the box, never leaving the top, just floating, like memory. The sleeper stared, eyes soft, breath slow. The glow lit their face gently, casting warm shadows beneath their eyes and nose. They felt peaceful, not afraid, not confused, just deeply quiet, as if something old had returned, something they'd forgotten they even knew. They sat like that for a long time, watching the snow inside the box drift and swirl. Then, somewhere below, a cow stirred. The sleeper blinked, looked up. The glow from the box began to fade, still warm, still soft, but dimming, as if it had been seen enough for now, as if it needed rest too. They closed the lid, wrapped the cloth back around it, tied the strap again, gently, and placed it on the hay beside them. They stood up slowly, brushing straw from their knees, and walked to the edge of the loft. The barn below was calm. The animals were settled. One of the cows let out a soft, muffled moo in its sleep. The moonlight now shone through the high window in full. It lit the floor below with a cool silver stripe. The snow outside had stopped entirely. The open doorway no longer let in wind or flakes. Only stillness. The sleeper descended the ladder, each rung creaking gently. At the bottom they paused. Something had changed. The air smelled the same. Waiting neatly beside the wooden comb, just where they had been left, and near them the box, wrapped again in wool, tied with the same leather strap. It sat quietly on the wooden platform. Its glow was gone now, no shimmer, no motion, just a memory of warmth, like the fading echo of a candle long blown out. The sleeper rested once again on the platform, wrapped tightly in their blanket, their bodies still, their breath deep, but their mind was slow to follow this time. Sleep didn't come as quickly now. Not because of fear. There was no fear, only quiet thoughts, soft wondering. A mind slowly rocking back and forth between the glow in the box, the missing visitor, and the strange sound from the loft. They tried to think of something simpler, the sound of hay under boots, the feel of wool against the cheek, the rhythm of cows breathing beside them. They remembered stories told by older relatives, tales of winters long past, of sleeping in barns when the fires ran low and the snow was too thick to shovel, Stories of sharing warmth with cows, chickens, even horses, of waking in the morning to frost on your eyelashes and milk already steaming in the pail. Life was slower then, sleep was shared, people stayed close. The sleeper's breath slowed again. The floor beneath them was warm from the cows. The air was sweet with straw and thyme, but just as their thoughts began to fade, as the drift of dream began to carry them away, a sound returned, not from the loft. From beneath the floor, it was faint, so faint it could have been nothing. The shift of wood, the groan of old boards, the twitch of a cow's hoof. But then, again, a murmur, a breath, then words. Not in English, not in Finnish either, just sound, gentle, human, a voice. Low, slow, spoken as if through layers of wood, as if muffled by decades of sleep. It came from beneath the wooden platform. The sleeper opened the maybe another floor, maybe earth. And there, just beside the opening, a step carved into the stone. Then another. The cows remained quiet. The box on the bed did not glow. The oil lamp was still unlit. And then, from the shadow beneath the trap door, a soft breeze rose, carrying a smell like pine needles and smoke, and a new sound. Not a voice, not a tap, but a bell. A small, single bell, ringing once, and then silence. The bell was quiet, just a single chime, no more than a second long. It hung in the air like mist, soft and silver, fading gently into the silence of the barn. Nothing else followed. No footsteps, no voice, just stillness. The sleeper remained crouched beside the open trap door, one hand on the edge, the other resting on their knee. Below, the opening in the floor breathed cool air from deep underground. It wasn't cold in a harsh way. It was the kind of cool that lives in cellars and earth-covered rooms. Still, calm, untouched by wind or sky. The cows stayed lying down. That was important. If there had been danger, they would have moved. They would have risen or called out. But now they only blinked slowly in the dark, their breath steaming softly in the faint moonlight spilling through the open barn door. The platform behind the sleeper remained just as before. The coat, the boots, the wooden comb, and the small, wool-wrapped box. Quiet now, not glowing, not warm. Just resting. The sleeper leaned forward and looked down through the trapdoor. There were 3 stone steps, worn, chipped, smooth at the center where countless feet may have passed. Each one just wide enough for a foot. Past them, the space opened into a small square room carved directly into the ground. The walls were built of stone, stacked by hand, the kind of round stones pulled from fields and rivers long ago. Moss grew in the gaps. The scent was rich and earthy, like a root cellar or a forest floor after rain. The sleeper lowered one foot onto the first step, then another. Slowly, carefully, the air grew cooler, the scent grew stronger. At the bottom, the room was surprisingly dry. The floor was packed dirt, but sod, swept clean, without puddles or debris. Along the wall there were shelves, carved from old wood, covered in jars and bundles. It looked more like a pantry than a secret place. Jars filled with herbs, dried berries, small stones, scraps of linen tied in neat rolls. Everything was placed with care. On the far wall, something hung from a wooden peg. A bell. Small, brass, a thin leather cord tied to its top. It was still swinging slightly. That was the sound they'd heard, The bell, not far away, not deeper, right here, just beside them, but no one had pulled it. The sleepers stepped farther into the room, their fingers brushing the tops of the jars. Some were labeled, but not in English or Finnish. The writing was curved, looping, soft, old. Maybe a dialect from long ago. Maybe not a language at all, just symbols. There was a small stool beside the wall, 3 legs, worn. The seat was carved smooth with use. Someone had spent time here. In the center of the room there was a circle, marked in the dirt, drawn not with ink or chalk, but with tiny pine cones, the small, tightly curled kind that fall in deep woods during early winter. Dozens of them, arranged in a perfect ring. Inside the circle, a bed of moss, green, alive, growing. It shouldn't have been. There was no sun down here, no heat, no rain, and yet the moss was soft and thick. It gave beneath the sleeper's hand like sponge cake, as if it had been watered by dream and tended by silence. In the center of the moss, another object, round, wrapped in cloth. They bent down and lifted it gently. It was warm, not like a living thing, but like something that had been resting near heat. Tea. The cloth smelled of cedar and birch smoke. Slowly, they unwrapped it, folding the layers back with care. Inside, a stone, smooth, flat, dark, green, the kind of stone shaped by river water, long, slow years tumbling over it until all sharp edges are gone. But this one was marked, etched with fine lines in the same looping script as the jars. At its center, a spiral, not tight, not dizzying. A wide, gentle curve, like the shape of sleep itself. As they stared, something shifted. Not in the room, in them, a feeling, a remembering. The stone wasn't frightening. It was familiar, like an old object passed down, seen only once in childhood, then forgotten until now. They placed it back on the moss and sat quietly beside it. The stone pulsed slightly with warmth, or maybe that was their hand remembering its touch. Above, the barn gave a soft creak. Just the sound of settling beams, likely, but still. It reminded them they weren't far from the world above. They stood and looked around the cellar once more. The air held no threat, only rest. Even the bell had stopped moving now, but as they turned to climb the stairs, they noticed something new. Another shelf, lower down, and on it, a wooden bowl. Inside the bowl, fur, soft, curled, pale gray, not fabric, not yarn, animal, not from a cow, not from any animal they could name. The fur moved, not much, just a ripple, as if something inside had taken a breath. The sleeper froze, one hand still on the wall, the fur shifted again. Not a lot, not like danger, but like life. Then, from the fur, the faintest sound, not a growl, not a cry, not even a breath, but a whisper. High-pitched. So soft it could have been the air escaping a jar, but it was something else. A single word spoken in a child's voice, and the word was their name. The name didn't echo. It didn't rise or fall. It simply appeared, like a pebble placed in your open hand, familiar, weightless, and quiet. your name, spoken in a voice soft as breath. From inside the bowl, you didn't step back, your hand didn't tremble. You only stood still, watching, listening, breathing in that damp, mossy air below the barn. Around you, the jars were unmoved. The bell didn't ring. The moss circle rested undisturbed. The stone still lay wrapped where you'd left it. But the bowl had changed. The fur inside it shifted gently, slowly. It didn't stir like a creature waking. It stirred like fabric in a breeze, a ripple across a field of fine gray hair. The kind of hair you might find on something newborn or very, very old. You knelt. The ground beneath you was dry and cool. The scent from the moss was still fresh in your nose, like wet pine and old sleep. The bowl was carved from wood. You could see the rings of the tree that once stood tall, now smoothed and hollowed by careful hands. The inside of the bowl held that fur, layered, curled inward, shining slightly in the dimness and resting in the center. Something small, no bigger than your palm, curled like a comma. It was not a mouse, it was not a bird. It was a shape, pale, sleeping. You leaned closer. Your breath did not disturb it. It did not wake, but again. Your name came, softer now, almost not sound at all. It was like the memory of being called, the shape your name makes before the mouth even moves. A vibration, a murmur, as if the name had been whispered many times before, and never stopped. The object in the bowl didn't move again, but around it, in the strands of fur, a glow began. Not bright, not sharp, just warmth, like the feeling when a hand reaches into yours beneath a blanket in winter. You blinked slowly. Nothing else changed. Only the quiet held you. Only the air. You sat down on the ground beside the shelf. The bowl remained untouched. The jars stood in their rows. The bell above did not ring. The steps leading back to the barn were behind you now. You did not turn toward them. Instead, you listened. The undergrowth, ound room had its own sound. It was not silence. It was not noise. It was more like listening to a forest from the inside of a tree. Everything still, everything distant, everything breathing. And within it, one more sound from the stone wall behind the shelf. Not a knock, not a whisper, not a call. A rhythm, like something brushing, a cloth perhaps, or the quiet drag of a hand. You stood once more. The shelf before you was built into the wall. Behind it, the stone was older than the rest. Darker, damp, covered in a thin growth of lichen, greenish-white, like snow remembered on rock. You reached toward the edge of the shelf and pushed, gently. It shifted, not a lot, just enough. A sigh of air moved from the cracks, and there, behind the shelf, a space opened. Not a doorway, not a tunnel, but a hollow, a pocket carved deep into the earth. You stepped into it slowly. The walls here were smooth, not made by hands, not carved by tools, shaped by water maybe over time, or by the settling of the land. The space was narrow at first, then opened wider. You moved slowly, ducking beneath a low part of the ceiling, and then you saw it. A second bowl, much larger, set into the ground itself. A shallow basin, almost like a nest, filled not with fur, but with ash, pale gray, soft as powder, and nestled in the ash. Another stone, twin to the one you'd found on the moss, but this one was warm without being touched. It pulsed once, then again, not a heartbeat, not a warning, just a rhythm, and surrounding the bowl, arranged in a perfect ring, were 12 more stones, each etched, each marked with the same spiral, and on the wall behind the ring, a symbol painted in dark red, not fresh, not blood. A kind of clay perhaps, or earth mixed with resin. It was the shape of a cow, long-horned, with a child on its back sleeping. The image was simple, but it did not feel primitive. It felt old in a way older than language. The air here had a weight, like it remembered too much. You stood very still. The warmth from the stone in the ash was stronger now. You didn't reach for it. You didn't need to. It reached for you, not with hands, but with memory. You were very small once. You had a fever. You were wrapped in wool. You heard bells outside your window, distant and strange, and you dreamed of hooves in snow. It comes back to you now piece by piece, and as you stand there in the quiet hollow under the barn, something begins to hum. Not from you, not from the stones, but from the ash, a vibration, like a string drawn gently across glass, like a note held in the throat of the earth. You don't feel fear, you feel returning. And then, from behind you, a single cough, wet, human, and close. The cough came once, not loud, just a soft, thick sound, like something trying to rise from sleep, or memory. It didn't come again. You stood still. The warmth of the stones was behind you now. The bowl of ash and its spiraled markings. The painted image of the cow and child. All of it waited in silence. Before you could turn, you listened again. Not for danger, but for shape, for presence, for whether the cough had come from air, or from something more. The cave around you was still. The only sound now was your own breath, soft and deep. Then, from the stone wall to your right, the one slick with age and lichen, came a voice, a woman's voice, thin and distant, not quite whispering, not quite awake, not so loud. It said, "The calf is sleeping." You turned. There was no one, just the curved wall, dark and cool, but now you could hear it more clearly. Not the voice itself, but the breath behind it. A slow rhythm. Inhale, pause, exhale. And as your eyes adjusted, you saw something, a fold in the stone, like a crack that had widened over time, no bigger than a narrow window. Yet there, inside, behind the rock, the faintest glow, flesh-colored, skin, not moving, but not stone, the surface of a shoulder, barely visible, pressed between layers of cool rock, as if the wall itself was holding someone, not trapped, just held, like a hand in soil, like a root wrapped in earth. You stepped closer. The breath continued, soft and steady. You could see more now, the curve of a jaw, closed eyelids, a line of silver hair curling at the edge of the face. She was resting, not buried, not hidden, simply sleeping in stone. You didn't speak, you just watched. The rock around her looked unchanged, as if she had always been there, not placed, not pushed, just grown into the land. Then, as you listened, her lips moved. No sound, just the shape of breath. The words formed without noise, but you heard them all the same. She sleeps warmest beside the herd. The air shifted, not the air in the room, the air inside you, like a blanket being drawn up gently to your chin. A heaviness, not fear, a soft gravity pulling you inward, toward stillness, toward something deep. You turned slowly, looking back toward the other chamber. The bowl of ash was quiet. The spiral stone at its center no longer pulsed, but the ash was different. Shaped, indented, like something had been resting in it. Something the size of a body, recently, and along the curve of the ash basin, hoof prints, not drawn, real, pressed lightly into the powder, as if something with soft hooves had stepped in and out of the bowl without sound. Each print the size of your palm. You stepped toward it, not quickly. The floor beneath your feet was gentle, dry, and as you reached the edge of the bowl, you felt it again. A scent, faint, like warm milk and moss, like breath from a newborn animal. And there, across the wall, another image painted like the first. But this one was upside down. The same cow, yes, same long horns. But no child. Only a pale shape falling from the cow's side, like sleep being let go, or taken back. You knelt, your hands rested on the edge of the bowl, still warm, still holding the silence that now thickened around you. Then, above you, the faintest sound, not in the chamber, not from the woman in the wall, not from the moss room, from care. Above the trapdoor, up in the barn, it was the sound of movement, cloth against hay. A step, slow, measured, then another. The creak of a wooden beam. The small shift of something heavy moving in straw. The cows, they were rising, but not all at once. Just one, then another. Then, a hush you stood. The weight in your legs was like wading through warm water. You moved through the low tunnel, back past the shelf, back into the stone-walled cellar beneath the barn. And there, above, soft, golden light. Someone had lit a lantern. It flickered through the cracks in the floorboards. You climbed the 3 steps up toward the trapdoor. The wood was cool to your touch. You pushed it open gently and emerged into a barn that had changed. The cows stood in a perfect circle facing inward, all of them, not resting, not feeding, watching something at the center of the floor. And there, just where the moss-wrapped box had been, stood a girl. She was barefoot, dressed in linen and wool, hair damp, eyes closed. She was not breathing hard. She wasn't afraid. She simply stood, with her hand resting on the back of the oldest cow. And in her other hand, the same green spiral stone from below. It glowed faintly, but not warm, cold. And around her neck, tied by a thin leather cord, was the tiny brass bell from the cellar wall. The girl opened her eyes. They were not surprised to see you. She tilted her head slowly. Her lips did not move, but her voice came gently to your ears, like the wind outside the barn door. "She's waking," she said. Then the cows all exhaled at once, a long breath, like snow melting off a roof, and from somewhere far beyond the barn, the sound of lowing. Not from a cow, not from anything you'd heard before. Something larger, something farther, something coming. The sound was not loud. It did not shake the barn or tremble the earth, but it reached in to your bones, like a voice you didn't remember, calling you from before you were born. It wasn't music. It wasn't speech. It was something in between, a low hum that curled around your ribs and asked you to be still. You stood beside the girl. The cows didn't move. They breathed, slow and steady, in their circle around her. Their eyes were soft, their ears twitched just once, and their long, steady breaths sent small clouds of warmth into the space between them, making the air shimmer. The girl held the green stone. It no longer glowed, it just sat in her palm, heavy and still, like it had finished what it came to do. You looked at her face. She was not frightened. She was not smiling either, just calm, like someone who has stood in this barn before, many times, in many years. Across many winters, she looked down at her bare feet, then at yours. "Come," she said softly. "We must walk to the stones." You didn't ask which stones. You didn't need to. Your body already knew. You followed her past the cows. Their eyes didn't follow you, but they shifted slightly, opening a narrow path in their circle just wide enough for 2 quiet steps. And then you were outside. The snow was very deep, but where the girl walked, the snow thinned, as if the air around her warmed it just enough to soften the crust. You followed her barefoot, but the cold didn't sting. It felt like stepping through a memory. There were trees on either side, tall, dark spruces, branches heavy with snow, bending low like old backs in prayer. The path curved gently down, and then the rocks came into view. Not large, just 5 stones, sticking up in a ring from the forest floor like teeth. They were greenish gray, round and wet with melted frost. The girl stopped. "This is where she first lay," she said. She didn't point, she didn't need to. In the center of the stones, the snow had melted into a circle, just wide enough for someone to curl up in. The moss there was dry, flattened, as if it had just been stood upon or slept in. Or used. "She used to come here," the girl said, still looking down. "Before we built the barn, before we understood what she needed. You didn't speak, you only listened. She doesn't mind the snow," the girl went on, "but the cold makes her dreams last too long." Then, from deep in the woods, the sound came again. That long, low breath, like the earth stretching in its sleep, not closer, not louder, but deeper. "She never comes when watched," the girl whispered. "We must lie down now." And so you did. You followed her into the ring of stones. She lay on one side. You lay on the other, your backs pressed gently into the moss, the snow curled around your knees, your fingers open to the air. Above you the sky was nearly black, but not with night, with slow, turning clouds, like smoke from pine wood, drifting slowly through old air. The girl closed her eyes, so did you. The stillness was so complete that even the birds did not call. Just breath, yours, hers. The slow movement of air across your face, like soft wool, and then a scent. It came like the first drop of milk in warm straw. sweet, heavy, familiar, like the smell inside the barn, but older, earthier. And then you felt something step between the stones, not loud but large. The weight of it pushed the moss down a little. Your back felt it, then the same sound of breath. But this time, close, she was beside you now, the long-legged one. You didn't open your eyes, you didn't need to. She smelled like smoke and milk and wet bark. You heard the sound of her joints as she knelt. Not bones, just old wood bending. You heard her nose as it pressed close to the girl's face, then yours, not touching, just near. And then, silence. Except for the wind curling in the trees, you waited, not with worry, with peace, like something important had noticed you, and was not in a hurry to decide anything. And then, suddenly, your forehead grew warm. Just there, between your eyebrows, the warmth pressed down gently, like the touch of a huge palm, the weight of sleep itself. And in that moment, though your eyes were closed, you saw her. Not fully, just a glimpse. She had 4 legs, but no hooves. She had skin like smoke and bark, and she had eyes like your mother's hands, remembering you as a child even now. Then the warmth lifted, and the sound of snow crunching returned. Slowly, like a body walking backward, step by step, out of the stones, out of the clearing, back into the forest, then silence. Long, soft, heavy. You didn't speak. The girl beside you turned onto her side. She took the green spiral stone and pressed it into the moss. "Now she knows," the girl whispered. And from the sky, a single flake of snow fell onto your lips. Not cold, just quiet. You stayed there until the stars opened between the clouds. You didn't dream. You didn't need to, you had already seen her, and in the far, far distance, you heard something knock. Wood on wood, slow and soft, as if a door was swinging open where no door had ever been. The knocking continued, but only once every few breaths, not sharp, not loud, but patient, as if it had been echoing for many years, and only now someone was close enough to hear it again. Snow still drifted from the clouds above, but it was light now, more like dust than flakes. The trees stood tall and silent around the stone ring, their dark green needles heavy with the stillness of night. The girl sat up quietly. Her hair was filled with frost. She looked toward the trees, then toward the sky, and then toward the moss where the spiral stone now rested, half buried. The moss was warm beneath the snow, steaming slightly in the cold air. Around the edges of the 5 stones, small patterns had formed. Not footprints exactly, but soft indentations, like something too large and too light had passed through and only pressed part of itself into the ground. The girl did not touch them. She only stood, brushing the snow for her arms, and began walking again. The knocking sound had stopped now, but the silence it left behind felt full, as if the trees were holding their breath, listening for something even deeper. Past the stone ring, the forest path narrowed. The trees grew closer together here, and the snow between them had not been touched in some time. As she walked, the girl stepped carefully, her bare feet sinking only slightly into the untouched white surface. The air smelled different here, less like pine and smoke, and more like old water, cold rock, and the faintest trace of iron. Far ahead, just at the place where the trees bent inward, a small wooden frame came into view. It was not a house. It had no walls, no roof, and no floor, just a door. A single, tall wooden door standing upright in the snow, with no building around it. The frame was made from birch trunks, their white bark peeling softly in the cold. The door itself was dark, nearly black, with long iron hinges and a handle made from twisted rope. It did not shine. It did not move. It simply stood there, waiting. The girl stopped just a few steps from it. Her breath showed in the air. She reached out her hand and touched the handle gently. It felt warm, even in the cold. The rope was smooth, worn down by many hands over many years. She didn't open the door, not yet. She only stood before it and listened. Somewhere on the other side, a sound moved, like heavy cloth dragging across stone. Very slow, very quiet. Behind her, the woods remained still. The snow continued falling, tiny and soft, landing without sound. A small animal passed through the underbrush nearby, but it did not run. It walked calmly, pausing every few steps to sniff the air, then moved on without a trace. The girl lowered her hand and sat in the snow beside the door. She didn't knock, she didn't call, she only waited. Far above, the sky began to open again. The stars were dim, clouded behind a thin veil, but they still shone faintly through the haze. One of them blinked, just once, like a slow eye closing. And then something changed. The snow stopped falling. Not all at once, but gradually, each flake taking its time before giving up its journey to the ground. The air thickened slightly, not with smoke, with presence. Something was now awake. The door creaked softly, not as if pushed, not as if blown, just as if it remembered how to move. It opened a crack, not wide, just enough for the faintest breeze to escape. The breeze carried no scent, no warmth, no cold, just stillness. The girl turned her head to the side and leaned toward the gap, listening again. From inside came the soft sound of breathing. Very slow, very deep. Not like a person, not like a cow. Something older than both. There were no footsteps, no shapes, no voices, but the feeling of being watched had returned, not with fear, with recognition, as if something behind the door remembered her or had been waiting for her. She did not speak, she did not smile, she only closed her eyes and rested her head against the wooden frame. She began to hum very softly, the same low tune the cows sometimes breathed when they slept. A lullaby with no words, a memory of rhythm more than melody. The door listened. Inside the barn, many kilometers away, the cows began to stir. They were not alarmed, they did not rise, but their ears moved. One by one, they shifted slightly in their stalls, adjusting the weight of their heads, exhaling long and low into the straw. The air inside the barn grew thicker, warmer, quieter, as if the walls remembered the sound too. Back at the door, the girl finished her humming. She stood again, and this time she pulled the door open. Not quickly, slowly. It gave way without resistance, the space beyond. It was not dark, but neither was it bright. There was a kind of light there, gray and soft, like mist before sunrise. Nothing behind the door was clearly visible. No shapes, no floor, no ceiling, just the feeling of being in the presence of something that had always existed but had never been named. The girl did not step inside. She waited beside the door and turned her head toward the trees. Then a sound began to rise again, low at first, then fuller. It was not the same breath as before. It was more like humming. But this time it came from the woods, not from her lips. A response, something deeper answering her song. It moved through the trees without breaking them. It pressed into the snow without touching it. It had weight, but no shape. And then it arrived, not before the door, but behind it. The sound stopped. The air grew still again, and the girl stepped aside. She didn't close the door, she only waited. The thing behind the door did not show itself, but its presence pressed gently against the edge, like a question that had been asked many years ago and was only now receiving its reply. And then something began to pass through. Not a body, not a shadow, something in between. At first, only warmth, then scent, like warm stones, steamed milk, and dried lichen, then the faint shimmer of air that bends just before lightning, but there was no storm, only quiet, and as the shape passed through the frame, the snow around it melted gently into the mossy floor. And just then, far away in the village, a single oil lamp, long since blown out, flickered back to life on its own. Its flame was small and still, and it began to cast a shadow against the wall. But the shadow did not match anything in the room. It was taller, and it began to move. The flame inside the small oil lamp swayed gently, though no wind touched it. Its glow was quiet, golden and steady, but on the wall behind it, the shadow moved in a way no shadow should. It didn't flicker with the lamp's rhythm. It didn't stretch with the shape of anything in the room. It stood tall, taller than the lamp, taller than the table, taller than the ceiling should have allowed, and though the lamp burned low and soft, the shadow seemed dark and full, as if cast by a midday sun. The room itself was empty. The wooden floor creaked softly from time to time, though no one stepped on it. A piece of cloth hanging near the window shifted slightly, as if brushed by air. The table beneath the lamp held nothing but a folded linen and a small bowl of salt. The flame in the lamp made no sound, yet the room now felt filled with listening. Far outside, snow had stopped falling altogether. The sky remained dim and low, no stars, no moon, only that soft, flat light that appears just before dawn or just after a long dream. Across the sleeping village, Rufus carried the thin lines of frost that sparkled faintly and then vanished, as though being erased one grain at a time. In the barn, the cows remained still, not asleep, but still, awake in that soft, warm state where everything slows down. They did not lift their heads, they did not stir their hooves. Their breath came in long waves, gently warming the straw. The scent of milk, hay, and wool filled the air. In one corner of the barn, a cow opened one eye and blinked slowly. She looked toward the door, not because of a sound, but because something had changed, somewhere between the village and the forest. The girl walked slowly through the snow again. Behind her, the door with no house stood slightly open. No sound came from it now. The presence that had passed through was gone, or perhaps only elsewhere. The girl's feet left soft prints behind her, each one slowly filling with pale mist. Her eyes were calm, her pace unhurried. She was returning through the trees. Small shapes stirred, birds without sound, watching from their perch. Foxes curled into themselves, now lifting their heads without fear. The forest was not asleep anymore, but it did not move quickly. It breathed as one slow thing. The girl reached the edge of the woods and looked out across the field toward the barn. The path was quiet, untouched. She began to walk, her hands tucked into the long sleeves of her wool coat. Her hair carried snowflakes that had not melted, resting there like stars that forgot to fall. A single wind moved across the field. Just one, and then it was gone. Inside the barn, the oil lamp on the far wall flickered and dimmed. The shadow on the floor, the one that had not belonged to anything, faded into the boards like mist sinking into water. The warmth remained, but the shape was no longer there. The cows did not notice, or perhaps they did and simply had no reason to react. They had seen many things, felt many changes. The barn was old, so were they. In the corner, the same cow that had lifted her eye earlier now stood slowly. She moved without effort, each hoof placed gently on the ground. She turned toward the door and waited. Outside, the girl's footsteps approached. The door creaked open very softly. She entered, brushing the snow from her coat, and looked around. She did not speak. She did not light a lamp. The one still burning was enough. She walked past the rows of cows, touching some of their sides gently as she passed. The cows leaned into her touch only slightly, just enough to say they noticed. The air inside the barn was warmer than the world outside, but not hot. It carried the scent of sleep, not just animal sleep, but the kind that fills a place over many nights, many winters. It was a shelter made not just of wood and stone, but of memory and silence. At the back of the barn, there was a small space, not a room, not a stall, just a section where soft wool blankets had been laid out on a raised wooden platform. Above it, small wooden beams crisscrossed under the roof. Hanging from one beam was a tiny charm, a bell no larger than a fingernail, wrapped in faded red thread. It did not ring. It had not rung in many years, but it still moved slightly side to side, as if remembering something far away. The girl knelt onto the blankets and lay down slowly, pulling one thick layer over her body. She tucked herself in close to the wooden wall. The wall was warm, not because of fire, but because behind it, cows slept, and their slow breath passed through the cracks in the wood like invisible lullabies. She closed her eyes. Outside, the village lights had dimmed. Inside the houses, old stoves clicked as they cooled, and the gentle tick of settling timber filled the empty corners. No one stirred, no one spoke. But from time to time, a soft creak or sigh would travel between the houses, as if the buildings themselves were dreaming. In one house, the one with the flickering oil lamp, a floorboard lifted. Just slightly, not enough to crack or shift the furniture, but enough to move. The lamp remained steady now. The shadow was gone, but beneath the floor, a warmth had settled in. Not heat, not smoke, a warmth that had no center. It pulsed every few seconds like a heartbeat far underground. Very slow, very old. Back in the barn, the girl's breath slowed to match the rhythm of the cows around her. Their bodies, large and gentle, created a sound that could not be heard, only felt. The kind of quiet that surrounds you when nothing needs to happen, the kind of calm that makes the body soften and the mind drift. Outside the barn, a faint shimmer passed through the snow. like a wave of warmth under the surface. It moved across the field toward the edge of the trees. It did not light anything. It did not stir the air. But as it moved, the frost on the fence posts melted, drop by drop. At the forest edge, the door with no house creaked shut again. Not fast, not loud, just enough to say the moment had passed, just enough to say, for now. And as it closed, a line of steam rose from the frame and vanished into the air. No marks were left, no footprints, only the memory of a presence. And in the quiet that followed, somewhere deep beneath the earth, something began to open. Not a door, not a tunnel, something older, a space, long sealed. And as it opened, a soft sound escaped, like the first breath after a long sleep beneath the frozen soil, where roots sleep through long winters and stones press close like old memories. Something had opened. Not with a crash or a tear, but with a long, quiet breath, the kind that only comes after centuries of stillness. The land did not tremble, the snow did not shift. But deep in the ground, a new warmth began to rise, gentle, slow, and steady, as if the earth itself was exhaling after holding something safe for far too long. In the barn, the girl still lay wrapped in thick wool blankets, her breath steady, her body still. Around her, the cows remained calm, unmoving. Some stood, some lay, but none stirred with concern. They felt the warmth too, not as a warning, but as a return. Something old, something remembered. Far off in the village, lamps began to dim, not all at once, one by one, as though an unseen hand moved slowly from house to house, pinching the light out gently like a mother helping her children fall asleep. No doors slammed, no windows rattled, but silence deepened, not the silence of emptiness, but of deep rest. The trees at the edge of the forest stopped swaying. Even without wind, they had been shifting slightly all night, the way trees sometimes do when they are waiting for something. Now they stood completely still, their branches lowered ever so slightly, as if in quiet respect. The door with no house remained closed, but a line of warmth spread slowly beneath it. Not light, not heat, just warmth, like the feeling of being remembered. Beneath the barn, under the wooden beams and straw, under the stone foundation and layers of old roots, the opening continued. It was not a hole or a tunnel. It was a space, a hollow place in the land, lined not with stone, but with the remains of woven cloth, feathers, and ash. It smelled of lichen, soft smoke, and something sweet, like honey left too long in the sun. In this space, sleep had once been kept, sleep of a different kind, not the kind that comes at the end of a day, not the kind one wakes from. This was the sleep that had shaped the land, the sleep that animals passed through in winter, the sleep that trees entered when days grew short, the sleep of stillness, of memory, of waiting. And now, very slowly, that sleep was rising, not as a threat, not as a storm, but as a blanket being pulled gently across the world. In the barn, the girl stirred only slightly, then sank deeper into the straw. Her fingers curled into the wool. Her breath slowed further. She was not dreaming. She was inside something larger than a dream, a sleep that stretched back generations, a rest older than history. Outside the barn, mist rose from the snow like breath from a sleeping animal. It curled upward, drifting through the fence posts, across the empty fields, and into the village streets. It crept beneath doorways, curled into hearths, and nestled into the folds of old quilts and feather mattresses. It entered without sound. It was not cold. It was not strange. It was simply the return of something forgotten. In the house with the flickering oil lamp, the flame went out at last. Not from wind, not from lack of fuel, it simply stopped burning, as though it had never needed to burn again. The lamp cooled. The shadow on the wall did not return, because there was no longer a need for shadows. Only rest. Elsewhere in the village, people slept. Their dreams were soft and slow, like fog rolling over old fields. They dreamed of barns filled with warmth, of cows breathing in the dark, of doors that led to place.